Imagine being hunted across 1,000 square miles of empty desert. Every shadow could be a soldier. Every sound, a death sentence. Your only hope? Staying invisible. But what if the one thing keeping you alive, the thing beating inside your chest, was exactly what could destroy you? What if right now, in the silence of that wasteland, something was listening for your heartbeat from 40 miles away? Before we uncover one of the most classified rescue operations in modern military history, and the impossible technology that made it happen, hit that like button. Drop a comment below telling us what you think the future of surveillance looks like. And subscribe so you never miss the stories that shape our world. Let's begin deep in the desolate mountains of southern Iran. An American weapons officer, known to the world only by his call sign, was running for his life. His fighter jet had been shot out of the sky in a violent explosion. In that chaotic moment, everything changed. He ejected, parachuted into hostile territory, and managed to find shelter in a rocky mountain crevice. For 2 days, he lay hidden in the darkness, barely breathing, listening to every footstep outside. But he wasn't alone in that desert. Enemy forces were tearing through the terrain, methodically searching every canyon, every ridge, every shadow. They had been offered something that made them relentless, a massive bounty. Find this man. Bring him in. And wealth beyond measure was yours. The airman became a phantom. A ghost. Lost somewhere in an endless expanse of stone and sand. Back at command centers thousands of miles away, military strategists faced an impossible problem. The officer had activated a survival beacon, a desperate signal sent from his hiding place. But even with that distress call, no one could pinpoint exactly where he was. The signal was too faint. The desert was too vast. The odds were impossible. But no one knew what would happen next. Somewhere in the shadows of America's most secretive military laboratories, scientists had been working on something that seemed to belong in a fantasy novel, not in a real government facility. Deep within Lockheed Martin's legendary Skunk Works division, the same group had created invisible aircraft and technologies that changed warfare forever. They had been developing a system with a name that sounded almost poetic. They called it Phantom Pulse. The name wasn't random. It was chosen with brutal precision. It represented the impossible task of finding a human being who had, for all practical purposes, vanished from existence. Here's what made it terrifying: most technology that detects human life requires you to be close. Very close. Hospital machines that measure your heartbeat? They need sensors pressed directly against your skin. Your phone can't detect a person through walls. Thermal imaging has limits. Radar gets confused in complex terrain. But Phantom Pulse operated on an entirely different principle. It relied on quantum science, the physics that governs the smallest particles in the universe. The system used specialized sensors built into synthetic diamonds engineered with microscopic defects, that could sense the faintest electromagnetic pulse, the rhythm of a human heart. Think about that for a moment. Your heartbeat generates an electromagnetic field. It's incredibly weak, so weak that normally you'd need medical equipment touching your skin to measure it. But these engineers had figured out how to amplify that signal. How to isolate it? How to hear it across unimaginable distances? And then they paired it with something even more powerful: artificial intelligence. The machine didn't just collect data. It learned. It analyzed. It filtered out the chaos of the environment, the hum of power lines, the electromagnetic noise from satellites, the radiation from the sun, and zeroed in on one thing and one thing only. One beating heart. It was like standing in a stadium filled with thousands of screaming fans and being able to isolate a single person's voice. Except the stadium was a 1,000 square mile desert. And the voice was a heartbeat. And the distance was 40 miles. This wasn't theory anymore. This was operational reality. The missing airman had made a choice. A terrible, desperate choice. Inside his crevice, safe from enemy eyes, his survival beacon sat dormant. If he activated it, he would have to leave his hiding place. He would have to step out into the open. He would have to expose himself to the freezing desert night, to the enemy patrols that were still searching, still hunting. Every second outside was a second closer to death. But every second inside was a second closer to being forgotten. He made the choice. He emerged from the shadows. He activated the beacon. A signal shot out into the void, a desperate cry for help transmitted to satellites overhead and relayed to military command centers. The beacon worked. The signal was received. But the search team still couldn't find him. The signal was too vague. The coordinates were too broad. The desert swallowed everything. He was still a ghost. But something changed in that moment when he stepped outside. His body, a living, warm object in a freezing desert, created a thermal signature. The night air dropped to brutal temperatures. And his heartbeat, that tiny electromagnetic pulse, became slightly stronger, slightly more detectable. The conditions were perfect. Not by chance. By desperation. Somewhere in a command post, operators watching the data from Phantom Pulse saw something shift on their screens. A signal. A pattern. A rhythm that didn't match the environment. From 40 miles away, through quantum sensors and artificial intelligence, they were hearing his heartbeat. They had found him. Once command confirmed the location, everything accelerated into a blur of violence and precision. Hundreds of American troops mobilized. Aircraft loaded with rescue teams and armed support. Helicopters converged on the coordinates. The plan was dangerous because the plan had to be dangerous. There was no quiet way to pull someone out of enemy territory. The extraction zone became a combat operation. The desert, which had been silent and empty, suddenly filled with the sound of rotors and engines. Two of the rescue planes became bogged down in the sandy terrain. They couldn't get airborne again. It was a catastrophic problem. If those aircraft fell into enemy hands, classified technology would be compromised. Operational details would be exposed. The military made a ruthless decision: destroy them. Send in additional aircraft. Use firepower to ensure nothing was captured. Amid the controlled chaos, soldiers reached the crevice. They found the airmen exhausted, dehydrated, but alive. The operation was a success. 0 American casualties. 1 recovered warrior. 1 impossible mission completed. By the time the dust settled and the last helicopter cleared the airspace, the full scope of what had just happened was becoming clear to a select few in intelligence and military leadership. A classified technology, one that had never been tested in real combat conditions before, had just changed the outcome of a rescue operation that should have been impossible. Months later, at a White House press briefing, officials gave the world a carefully edited version of the truth. The operation was called a success. The airmen had been recovered safely. American technology and military prowess had prevailed against impossible odds. When asked how they found him in such a vast, desolate landscape, the response was cryptic. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Those who understood military technology, those who worked in intelligence agencies, those who followed classified program rumors, they heard the real message in that metaphor. Finding a needle in a haystack should be impossible. But what if you had a tool that could sense the heartbeat of that needle? The existence of Phantom Pulse, its operational deployment, and its role in the rescue were implied but never confirmed. Denied but not credible. It existed in that murky space where government technology lives, real enough to shape history, classified enough to never be fully acknowledged. But here's what the briefings didn't mention. What they quietly understood but didn't broadcast. Phantom pulse is not magic. It's a tool. And every tool has boundaries. First, there's time. The quantum sensors need processing power. The artificial intelligence needs to run its algorithms. In a life or death race, where enemy forces are closing in by the minute, the system's need for processing time could be lethal. The technology could give you the exact location, but only after it's too late. Second, and more critically, there's the environment. The barren Iranian desert was perfect for phantom pulse. Almost no other human signatures. Minimal electromagnetic interference. Clean, empty space where a heartbeat could stand out like a beacon. But what about a city? What about a crowded urban center with thousands of people, millions of electrical signals, power lines, cell towers, wireless networks creating a cacophony of electromagnetic noise? In that environment, phantom pulse would be blind. Imagine an apex predator, a hunter evolved to detect the faintest prey, suddenly thrust into a jungle where there are 1,000 other animals, 1,000 other heartbeats, 1,000 competing signals all screaming at once. The technology would fail. It would drown in the noise. This is the hard truth about next-generation surveillance and tracking systems. They are incredibly powerful in specific conditions. Devastatingly effective in the right environment. But they remain vulnerable to complexity, to chaos, to the messy reality of the modern world. The question now isn't whether phantom pulse worked, it did. The question is what comes next. Military documents indicate that the system has been successfully tested on Black Hawk helicopters. Plans exist for integration onto advanced fighter jets, giving pilots the ability to locate and track targets from altitudes and distances that would have seemed impossible just years ago. But the classified documents are silent on the tactical deployment, on the offensive applications, on what it means when this technology becomes integrated into the arsenal of advanced warfare. As engineers in black-budget programs continue refining the system, they're working to address its limitations. Faster processing, better noise filtering, enhanced range. The goal is clear: create a tool so effective, so comprehensive, that it eliminates the blind spots. Which leads to a haunting reflection. If a heartbeat can give you away in the silence of a desert today, how long until there's nowhere on Earth to hide? In a future where quantum sensors become miniaturized, where artificial intelligence becomes faster and more sophisticated, where surveillance networks become ubiquitous, what does privacy even mean? This is the story of one impossible rescue. But it's also the story of the invisible world being created around us. A world where the most intimate biological signature, the rhythm of your heart, can become a liability. Where the technology to find you already exists. Where being lost, being hidden, being truly alone, might become impossible. The airman who hid in that mountain crevice was saved by the very technology we're now beginning to grapple with. But future generations might not be so lucky. They might face a world where phantom pulse isn't an experimental system used in extreme circumstances. It might just be everywhere. If you made it this far, you understand why this story matters. It's not just about a rescue operation. It's about the future of technology, privacy, and what it means to be hidden in a world that's learning to see everything. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you think happens when technology like this becomes widespread. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because these are the stories the mainstream media won't tell you. Stories that matter. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Phantom Heartbeat, the rescue mission no one was supposed to know about.
you.